Welcome back, everybody, and we will continue with our ongoing discussion on Aristotle's politics. Now, it is very interesting, very interesting to continue with our readings of politics. You see, it is essential that we try to, before we go any further, to also try to give you an idea and try to in a sense differentiate, not just differentiate, but also show the difference in the contrast in ideas between Aristotle and that of his teacher Plato and his teacher Socrates. You see, we can put Socrates and Plato in one category, and also we can put his Aristotle in another, and this will show a big contrast, because you see, ultimately I think politics, we can define, I think we get a proper idea about the purpose, the end, the ultimate purpose of politics from Aristotle. I don't think we can find, and I'm sure we have not found, because we have gone through the lectures on Socrates and Plato, and if you have not, I would suggest that you go back and view the lecture videos on Socrates and Plato, and then you'll have a better idea about why I'm saying such. The thing is this: we do not in any sense get an idea or a picture about the ultimate purpose of politics. I think that Plato and Socrates do talk about politics, but not to the extent that that Aristotle speaks of. And this is why, you see, politics for Aristotle is very practical, and thus for Aristotle, politics is a practical science, right? It's a practical science. And as for Socrates and his student Plato, politics is rather theoretical, right? It's something abstract, it's something philosophical. It is something which is attainable in the sublime, in the ultimate, which is beyond the world which we dwell. While on the other hand, for Aristotle, he sees politics to be worldly in the sense that not just in a material, concrete sense, but also to be active in it, right? Action. We have to act. It requires action. For Aristotle, if politics is to attain its ultimate goal, then the person or the people or the citizens or the subjects, whatever you may call it, we have to be engaging in the world. We have to be active in the world. We have to take part. We have to participate. That's why, for Aristotle, politics is a practical science, and we see this difference between Aristotle and his teachers, Socrates and Plato, mostly Plato, from his view on what politics ultimately is. And if you have listened to the previous video lecture, you will find that for Aristotle, the ultimate aim of politics is the good life, right? Is to enable the citizens, is to enable people in a political community to attain good life, to attain happiness, or what Aristotle would say, eudaimonia. And by happiness, it simply means what? It simply means to prosper, to thrive, to be healthy, to be in order, right? So the thing is, for Aristotle, politics is a practical thing. And this is the reason why, for instance, this practical essence, a practical view of politics, enables Aristotle to view politics as it actually is. You see, for Aristotle, what differentiates him mostly from his predecessors, Plato and Socrates, is that he looks at the concrete reality of what politics actually entails. The kind of the society we live in, the kind of people that inhabits the society, the kind of the temperamentality and the habits of the society, of the people that constitute the society. So he looks into every practical, concrete aspects of a society in order to truly understand what politics is, and hence then dictate what kind of what form of regime, or what forms of government is most aptly suitable for a given society. For him, for instance, for Aristotle, there is no such thing as a perfect form of government. Of course, he has one by the form of kingship or monarchy and aristocracy, but he also realizes that it is rather a fool's garden, right? A fool's aim. It's rather an illusory fantasy to think that the perfect form of government is attainable here on this world, here in the actual practicality of the actual world. However, for Socrates and for Plato, his predecessors, for Plato and Socrates, he seems they are also aware of the fact that it is not, the perfect regime is not possible. But then for them, you cannot, there is no, they reduce the actuality of politics to a very rudimentary, very, very basic, very unpolished, uncultured realm of human affairs, which for both Plato and Socrates, it's not a very good realm to be in, because ultimately, if you have glimpsed the sublime, the ultimate, nothing else matters. So, what Aristotle is trying to make us see, make the readers understand, is that politics should be concerned, and it should be concerned with the actual, right, with the actuality of the world. What politics is in actuality, not the ideal, right? Because for Plato and Socrates, they are dealing with the ideal state, right? So hence you have the idea of the rule by the philosopher rule, or the justice, the perfect justness of things. Rather, for Aristotle, he sees politics to be concerned mainly with the actual, how it is in the world, not just with the ideal. Of course, it's good to ruminate and to think about the ideal, what the best form of government should be. However, he puts more emphasis on the actuality, on the actual, what do we actually have, what sort of government do we actually have, what sort of regime do we actually have on this earth, or in this world, or in this society or that society, not the ideal. Of course, for Plato and Socrates, they are dealing with the ideal. They care mostly of the ideal. The ideal should be this. The perfect regime should be that. However, for Aristotle, it is important, right? Quite rightly so. However, the actuality is most important, more important so than the ideal. You see, and because Aristotle is dealing and he tries to understand the actuality, the actual form of government that we are faced with, the actual form of government that actually exists here on earth, or the actual form of government, the actual varieties of forms of government that actually exist in various societies, we must deal with that, not with the ideal. And in order to truly understand the actual form, the various kinds of forms of government that actually exist in various kinds of societies, is that in order to do that, we have to examine and contextually understand the actual problems that we face while organizing any political community. And of course, what is politics? For Plato, politics is simply how do we best organize a political community so that the ultimate purpose of politics, which is happiness, i.e. the good life, i.e. to prosper and thrive, is attainable for most of the people in the society, right? That's the ultimate aim, to enable people in the community to lead a good life, right? To lead a good life. By good life means virtuous life, an ethical life. And of course, when we speak of virtue, it just means excellence in doing something that you do, right? You may be an excellent teacher. A society composed of excellent teachers, excellent leaders, excellent students, excellent parent, excellent son, excellent daughter, an excellent fisherman, an excellent carpenter, so on and so forth. That is what excellence means. That is ultimately what good life is. The good life entails the excellence in doing what you do. And hence, because this is the aim of politics, according to Aristotle, we must deal with the actual form of regime that actually exists in societies. Because even though we do care about the ideal, the best form of government, what should be the best form of government, the reality is anything but ideal, right? We may speak a lot about the best form of government, what should be it, what is the best form of democracy, how it should be arranged, but the reality is rather complex. You don't have to believe me simply, but if you just look at the problems regarding instituting democracy or establishing democracy in the Middle East, you see how difficult it is. In fact, if you look at, for instance, the kinds of democracy we find in Asia, in Africa, is anything but the kind of democracy that we speak of, right? Of course, it will be very difficult in societies such as Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, or forget about those continents, but also look at the society here in India, or even the states in India, such as Nagaland, or Manipur, or Assam, or Arunachal. We say that we are a democratic society. We follow a democratic form of government. But however, in actuality, it's anything but democratic, right? So the reality is very, very complex. It's not ideal. We may speak of the ideal form of government, but that is not the end of politics for Aristotle. We must understand, right? Examine and contextually understand the actual problems we face while trying to organize a political community. That political community may be authoritarian, maybe monarchical, maybe democratic, maybe theocracy, so on and so forth. But then for Aristotle, let me just put it bluntly. He does not care, right, what kind of regime a given society is. What he's trying to make us understand and what he's trying to make us see is that you can have various kinds of democracy, various kinds of oligarchy or tyranny or monarchical or aristocratic or oligarchical. You cannot have just one. For instance, you cannot have a democracy and that form of democracy is applicable everywhere in the world. That is not the case. For Aristotle, it's anything but standardized. You cannot standardize, you cannot generalize democracy or oligarchy. Even among democracy, you have various kinds of democracies, and we'll get to that later. But then, for now, I want you to understand that Aristotle cares more of the realities of things, realities that exist, the real challenges that is faced by leaders and statesmen whenever they try to organize a political community. And this brings us to a very quick digression, which I have to make because it will give you a better idea about why we are speaking of why I in the first place try to contrast Aristotle's thought with that of Socrates and Plato. And you see, Aristotle provides, especially Aristotle's politics, it provides a big break, right? A separation between Aristotle and Socrates and Plato. On the other hand, it's very easy. It's very helpful if you try to if you picture in your mind two columns. On one hand, you have Plato and Socrates, and on the other, you have Aristotle. And that's how big of a chasm, maybe in a sense, different they are. And it has to deal with the ideal, right, the perfect. You see, like I mentioned earlier, for Aristotle, the practical, what is actual, what actually exists, is far more imperative, is far more essential than what we think of as ideal. Because the reality is very, very different. And even to establish, even to achieve and attain the ideal form of government we may have is very, very difficult, if not impossible. While on the other hand, for Socrates and Plato, they emphasize the imperative of the ideal, that nothing else matters except for the ideal. If you do anything, it should be for the ideal. If you say that you believe in something, it should be for the ideal. The ideal should guide you, right? And it must be the purpose of the state. It must be the purpose of your life, state, society, whatever, to try to direct your life and try to approach towards the perfectness, the ultimate sublimity of things, right? And of course, both Socrates and Plato, they admit themselves that this ideal itself is untenable. It's not attainable, right? It's untenable in this world. And of course, that's why you have, for instance, Plato's philosopher's rule, if you look at the Republic. And you have Socrates that says, I know nothing, right? So, I mean, these are the things. I mean, I want you to keep these things in mind. And it is very, very essential that you know these things, because it's simply not ideal, and it's simply not right, and it is simply not just to read Aristotle and Plato and Socrates literally, and that is what's happening, especially in India, especially in India and Nagaland. Whoever teaches Western philosophy, right, political philosophy, they have no idea what they're talking of, really. If you don't believe me, check out the various YouTube videos that you find. They literally understand the writings, or they literally read, like literally. They have a literal understanding of, which is not good. They have a literal understanding of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, which is really, really, I mean, baffling. And I'm wondering how do they even, why are they even allowed to teach? But hey, this is India, so everything is messed up. But nevertheless, you can never have a literal understanding, because that is a mistake, to have a literal understanding of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates. And this is why, because you see, when Plato speaks of the philosopher's rule, right, and when Socrates says, I know nothing, it is their way of saying that the ideal is something which we all should work towards. It's something, the ideal, we should all try to strive towards the ideal. However, on the other hand, it is not tenable. We can never attain the ultimate goal. We can never reach the perfectness of things. I.e., we can never attain here on earth, here on this existence, the perfect ideal regime. However, if you should know, that's what they're saying, if ideal were to be possible, then this is what it would look like. However, for instance, Plato's Republic, right? Here Plato speaks of the philosopher's rule. However, of course, many Indian teachers would say, "Oh yeah, philosopher's rule," right? That's what Plato advocated. However, it's wrong. Plato is only showing us that if the ideal is possible, this is what the ideal would look like. However, on the other hand, it is not attainable, right? It is not attainable. And why is it not attainable? It is not attainable here on earth. Why? Because we have a limited knowledge. We can only strive towards it, but it is itself very, very limited. That's why when we speak of Socrates and Plato, and when we read numerous dialogues, Plato's Meno, Plato's Republic, and even Socrates, there was this ongoing discussion about the ideal, discussion about what justice is. But in all of those dialogues, if you remember, if you have not, go back and watch the videos on Socrates and Plato, both Plato and Socrates, they never gave us the definition of what justice is. Nor did they give us they did not give us what justice is. In other words, you can never define what the ideal is, right? Because that's how imperfect we are. That's how fallible we are. Our knowledge is limited. Our knowledge is limited. Our wisdom itself is limited. That's why we can think of it, but then we can never attain it. And sometimes, because we are so fallible and our knowledge is so weak, we can never truly fully comprehend the ideal itself. So for Plato, the philosopher's rule is just an imperfect explanation of what an ideal form of government would look like. You see, this is the key. I don't think many people know this, and especially not Indians. You see, the thing is this: Plato's philosopher rule is an imperfect exposition of what a perfect form of rule would look like if it was attainable. Alright? So same thing with Socrates. When he says that he knows nothing, that he is aware of his own ignorance, what he's trying to tell us, is that we can never reach the ideal because we are so ignorant, i.e. we have a weak, limited knowledge. And with that limited knowledge, it is very difficult to even fully grasp the sublimity of the ultimate, the sublime, right? And that's why many teachers here in India have a literal understanding. That's why they are doing a great crime against these great philosophical thinkers. I think it's a big crime, and they should just simply stop it. So Plato and Socrates, whenever they speak of the philosopher's rule, when they speak of justice, when Socrates says he knows nothing, these are indicative of, or their way of saying that the ideal itself is not tenable, right? It's untenable here in this existence. And the ultimate goal, right? Because for Plato and Socrates, the ultimate goal is simply beyond the reach of many. It's simply beyond the reach of the actual, right? Simply beyond the reach of the actual. They say that only philosophy can help attain the ultimate purpose. Only philosophy, right? Only philosophy can help attain the ultimate purpose. And of course, when we speak of philosophy, I hope you know what I mean. To think about it, to seek knowledge, right? So when they say only philosophy can help attain that ultimate purpose, but the thing is, they say, i.e. Socrates and Plato, they're also saying that even if philosophy can only even if philosophy can help us attain and grasp the ultimate purpose, what we attain ultimately is imperfect, since life itself, our life, can never grasp nor truly understand and comprehend the ultimate, the sublime. We can never attain them. In other words, with this in view, what Socrates and Plato are saying is that everything else is simply too ordinary, right? If once you have a glimpse, a philosopher search for the truth. Once they find the glimpse, for instance, if you remember in Plato's Republic, the allegory of the cave, right? The allegory of the cave. Remember that? So once the philosopher's quest for knowledge and wisdom, once they attain a glimpse, they will not see everything. Once they see the glimpse of the sublime, of the ultimate, everything else is simply too ordinary and not worth considering as something worthwhile. Why? Because once you have seen the glimpse, once you have glimpsed and seen the ultimate, you will not concern yourself with the affairs of man, right? You will not concern yourself with the affairs of man. And this is the reason why Socrates was deemed to be dangerous, right? He was seen to be very, very dangerous. Why? Because what if you don't care about the human world, right? If you have, say for instance, like Socrates, glimpsed the ultimate purpose of everything. Once you have seen that, everything else, like who rules, why should you rule, who should have the power, who should have the economic wealth, all these things, the quest for fame, the quest for wealth, the quest for ambition, the quest for power, the quest for fame, all these things are meaningless. They are worthless. Why? Because compared to the sublime, the ultimate, everything else is just temporary. Everything else is frivolous. Everything else is superfluous. Everything else is just how do I put it? The word escapes me. everything else is just ordinary, right? Ordinary. Why? And then once you have, and then because everything else is ordinary, you don't care about the affairs of man, right? Who rules, what not. And if you don't care about the affairs of man, then you really don't care about this. Then you really don't care about the state. You really don't care about the country, right? And if you don't care about the country, just imagine if all the people in one country don't care about the country, then the country, the state, the government collapse, right? They collapse. And once they collapse, those in power also loses their power. And that's why, that is the reason why Socrates was deemed to be dangerous, because those in power wanted to stay in power, right? And Socrates' ideas and his beliefs and his teachings were a threat to their power. That's why he was deemed to be dangerous, and hence he was executed. Not executed, but then, arrested with the trumped up charges, and then, ultimately he had to pay the price with his life. So ultimately, and that's why, coming back to the issue, and because for Plato and Socrates, once you have glimpsed the ultimate, you really don't care about the affairs of the man, because you have seen the ultimate purpose, right? And everything else is ordinary, because you have seen the sublime. And this is why, and this is where, not why, but this is where Aristotle differs from both Plato and Socrates. And the reason simply is this. You see, while on the other hand you have Socrates and Plato speaking of the ideal, right, that is not attainable, you have Aristotle who says, forget about the ideal, right? Forget about the ideal. We are going to deal with the real, with the actual, with the forms of government that actually exist, with the forms of government that we actually have, right? We want to know that. We want to understand it. We want to see if it can be made better. And if it is better, how do we make it even better, right? In other words, how do we push it forward towards the ideal, right? That's what Aristotle is trying to say. And this is where the big difference is between Socrates and Plato on the one hand, and Aristotle on the other hand. And this is also the reason why, right? This is why all the more reason for us not to be literal in our readings and our understandings of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, right? Because, for instance, I'm sure if you have read the reading materials of Aristotle's Politics, you'll find that he speaks of various kinds of regime or various forms of government such as democracy or oligarchy or monarchical kingship, aristocracy, polity and tyranny. And indeed, some of these terms may seem outdated, maybe irrelevant in modern day, right? Such as property qualification, or you have a judiciary system which is composed not of experts but of ordinary men. So you see, if you read Aristotle Politics, you'll see that if you read it literally, you will find it quite outdated and irrelevant, right? Relevant. He speaks of kingship. He speaks of landowners. He speaks of, in order to possess the office, you have to have a property, whatnot, etc., blah blah blah. However, if you read it literally, then you have the wrong idea about Aristotle, and hence you misread his politics and misread his whole philosophy. To understand his writings, right, what is most essential and what is most important is that to truly understand and properly understand his writings, we must try to read him and understand him and put it in our present context, right? Because a lot of what he says has a deep relevance even today in 21st century India, 21st century world, 21st century Nagaland, right? But we do have, if you try to understand his readings and try to put into and try to understand what he's trying to say in today's present context, you will find, and this is what we'll be discussing, we find that by doing so, he provides us with a new, fresh understanding of the forms of government we are faced with today, right? Much of what he says, if we try to put in the context, if you try to put it in our present context, it makes a lot of sense, and you'll understand why this is so. You may be surprised, but then as the lecture goes on, you'll find exactly what I'm talking about. So this is what he tries to put into, and this is where we are going to. This is where it gets very, very interesting, especially for Aristotle. You see, because he tries to make us understand and see that just because we are dealing with politics, which is a practical science, and just because we are also going to deal with the ideal, it does not simply mean that we should disregard the actual, unlike those proposed by the ideal as proposed by Plato and Socrates. In fact, they have done a great injustice, according to Plato and Aristotle. According to Aristotle, Plato and Socrates, according to Aristotle, have done a great injustice by highlighting the importance and the imperative of the ideal over the actual. Because by doing so, you are kind of left with what. So, but then the question is, Aristotle will say, if you only care about the ideal, then what about the actual? Because we are living it, right? We are living in a tyranny. We are living in a monarchy. We are living under a dictator. We are living under a democratic system, right? How about that? How do we even make it better for the majority of the men, that's majority of the people that lives in our society? How do we make the best out of the condition that we are in? That's what Aristotle is trying to make us understand, and this is what makes his politics, his idea of politics, even practical and more prudent as compared to Plato and Socrates. Because for Plato and Socrates, we don't really care about the ideal. We really don't care about what kind of society you live in and the forms of government that you have. We only care about the ideal, and we should deal with that, right? And if we care about the ideal, we don't even care about the government, right? You should not, and that's the whole basis of the ideas. You really don't care. You really should not care about the kind of government or the forms of government that you live in. Means that your society has. If you truly care about the ideal. However, Aristotle is saying, no. If you do that, then what about the now? What about the present? What about my life? What about my existence here, right now, right? Because it affects me. The kind of the forms of government in which I live under, that really affects my life. So Aristotle is saying, you see, that's why it's not a question of what is the best and try to attain the best. It is important. However, what is even more important is to how do we make the best out of the given situation, right? How do we make the best something out of nothing? I suppose you can say that. Making something out of nothing. In other words, given the condition that you have, no matter how bad, no matter how arduous it may be, how do we make it better, right? And what is truly possible? What is truly attainable here on earth? What is truly attainable in existence, right? What can we actually, in actuality, achieve? What can we in actuality achieve a certain form of government, right? We don't have the good or the bad, right? For Aristotle, there's no, he speaks about the perverted form and the ideal form. However, in actual sense, he has no good or bad. He only has these are the forms of government that we have. Given the condition of society, this is the kind of society we may have, and if you are in this kind of situation, you may want to do this and that. That's what he is trying to. This is what he's trying to. What he is trying to show us, and this is what makes his politics even more ideal and even more interesting to discuss, which we shall discuss in the next lecture. So, in the next lecture, we are going to deal with, we are going to go even further and then discuss more in depth about Aristotle's politics. But now we'll end here and hope you have enjoyed the video, and I look forward to all of you for the next video lecture. Alright, thank you. Stay blessed. Alright, take care.